Texas Stream Team at the Meadow Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University has partnered with the Nueces River Authority to train citizen scientists to evaluate riparian health along streams and rivers. The remarkable Riparian Field Guide provides the bullseye evaluation tool as a way to evaluate riparian areas for their function and to identify activities that may be hindering the natural riparian recovery process. This video training consists of two segments. The first segment, What is Riparian?, introduces the components of physical function in a riparian area and builds understanding about conditions that can hinder function and keep riparian areas dysfunctional. The second segment, Learning to See the Bullseye, introduces the Bullseye Riparian Health Evaluation Tool for citizen scientists, landowners, and land managers. The evaluation protocol can lead to the identification of activities or conditions that may be hindering riparian recovery. Texas Stream Team citizen scientists are encouraged to use the Riparian Bullseye to evaluate the riparian health of their assigned water quality monitoring site 1 to 2 times per year, and to submit the results along with photo point images to Texas Stream Team. Consistent notation of your observations combined with the photos collected over time are key to monitoring riparian health. This protocol is included in the Texas Stream Team Quality Assurance Project Plan approved by the Texas Commission for Environmental Quality. Both video segments of this training are part of a series of digitally produced lectures within Riparian Function and Management, a new online class created by Nueces River Authority and offered at Sul Ross State University through the Sustainable Ranch Management Program under the direction of Dr. Bonnie Warnock. Much of the photographic content for this course was developed by leading riparian experts Steve Nelly, Kenneth Mabin, and Ricky Lennox.
This is a term that has just come into common usage in Texas in the past 10 to 15 years, even among land management professionals. A riparian area or zone is the part of the landscape that flanks rivers and streams, shown in blue on this picture. It does not include the channel or the water. It's the land that lies between the drier uplands and the wetted channel. The riparian area pictured here lies along the Concho River near San Angelo and can easily be distinguished as the greener, more lush area, in contrast to the less green uplands. It's the ribbon of land that follows and interacts with the waterway. The riparian areas include the stream bank, a floodplain, and all things within that area: plants, soil, logs, organic debris, and such. Areas adjoining lakes and reservoirs are also considered riparian, and when they are large and saturated, they are often referred to as wetlands. We use the term lentic for water bodies that contain standing water. This course will focus mainly on riparian areas that lie near running water, known as lotic water bodies. In a greener overall landscape, the riparian area may not stand out so boldly. This riparian area can be delineated by the presence of plant types. Riparian plants have some special characteristics, and you can begin reading about them in your remarkable Riparian Field Guide. On the Rio Grande Plain, riparian areas often contain some of the same vegetation that you might find in the uplands. Mesquite and huisache, both classified as UPL or upland plants, are common, but they're also sometimes found growing in close proximity to riparian grasses and sedges. In this flatter country, streams can become braided with multiple channels. The riparian area along the Nueces in McMullen County near Tilden is most easily identified by the presence of flood debris as evidence of recent flooding or inundation. A similar situation can be seen on this creek in LaSalle County near Cotulla. The bright green plants here are spiny aster and eastern gamma, both facultative riparian grasses, which are able to thrive in both wet and dry conditions. These, combined with evidence of inundation by floodwater, are clues to identifying this riparian area. Many publications have sought to define the extent of riparian areas, but none have proven 100% meaningful in on-the-ground applications. The channel and valley slope and type, presence of riparian plants, evidence of frequent inundation, evidence of water storage, and other factors may indicate riparian location and extent. That size and location can vary greatly between rivers and along the same river and can change over time. Sometimes it becomes helpful to use an average width in planning and estimating restoration and preservation activities, but that number is most meaningful when based on actual conditions. Widening of a riparian area and narrowing of a channel is typically indicative of improving health. Conversely, narrowing of riparian areas and widening of the water channels can characterize hindered recovery or comprised function. Management practices can influence riparian area size, as well as functional condition. We sometimes say that an area wants to be riparian but is hindered by the presence of one or more hindrances. Along coastal creeks and in areas of tidal influence, riparian areas can be very wide. In places, it may be difficult to find their outer extent. Coastal areas may contain both lentic and lotic watercourses, and the land flanking them may be equally referred to as wetland or riparian. Riparian areas also exist in cities and can be found along urban drainage ways. The width of urban riparian areas is often said to be a certain number of feet wide, but this is for convenience and planning. A riparian area, even in an urban setting, will be as wide as it can be, depending on the landscape being drained. And for the services they provide, we want riparian areas to be as wide as possible. To determine extent of existing riparian areas and to identify opportunities for the expansion, one must spend time on that creek or river. Before we leave the subject of what is riparian, let's look at some official federal agency definitions. The Bureau of Land Management definition calls for influence of permanent water and excludes ephemeral streams. Ephemeral streams run only as a result of runoff and maintain no connection to a water table. Ephemeral streams are commonly referred to as arroyos, draws, or ditches. We will discuss stream flow classification in our next lecture. For now, you will note that riparian and wetland definitions are tied to a regular presence of water. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says riparian areas are plant communities next to water bodies, and they are usually transitional between wetlands and uplands. The U.S. Forest Service says riparian areas are 100 feet from a perennial stream. The U.S. Department of Agriculture says they are ecosystems along a watercourse, influenced by free or unbound water. All of these definitions seem to have been created for a purpose, either programmatic or regulatory, and are not entirely meaningful in managing riparian land for functional conditions. We have a big state in Texas. About 168 million acres are contained with the state's boundary. This vast landscape is drained by creeks and rivers of many sizes and shapes. The tiny blue lines shown on this map illustrate a kind of vascular system, a set of natural drainways that transport and deliver water and sediments to larger and larger streams, and eventually to Coastal Bay or Gulf of Mexico. Lots of life, almost all life, depends on this system. In Texas, the water and sediment is delivered by more than 11,000 named streams and many more unnamed tributaries. Think about riparian areas that flank these blue lines. They are a small piece of the overall landscape. Most of the land in Texas is upland. Most of the land and natural resource management efforts in Texas have been focused on the upland landscape. The tiny riparian landscape has been mostly ignored. It has been the stepchild, so to speak, of resource management programs and the sacrifice area of many agricultural operations. According to the National Research Council, the percentage of riparian and riparian-related publications and citations within a nationwide literature search reveals a steep increase in recent years. The last 3 decades show an exceptional trend toward increased research activity on a wide variety of riparian topics. These trends imply that many current natural resource managers, elected officials, and the general public acquired their educational backgrounds during a period when riparian issues, functions, and values were likely never mentioned or discussed, much less emphasized. Even in today's era of general environmental awareness, educational programs have been slow to incorporate subject matter that addresses the importance of riparian areas or how they work. Now, in Texas, we are realizing, as most other western states have, that riparian areas, despite their small size, are responsible for providing a disproportional set of important water benefits, and that they have been mostly misunderstood. Riparian conditions directly influence water quality and quantity, an area critical to health of a stream. Management decisions that directly influence riparian health areas are extremely influential in this regard. Based on the 1% estimate, there may be about 1.6 million acres of riparian land in Texas, a size you could really wrap your mind around, making riparian areas a good place to focus limited resources to produce water-related benefits. Regardless of how it's defined, people have always known that riparian areas were special. This is evidenced in Texas by the early survey plats designed along creeks and rivers. The early surveyors traced creeks and rivers in platting land in much of Texas. The official form for recording a survey called for the location situated on the waters of a named river or citing the tributary to a named river. These early plats recognized riparian function and stream morphology in calling for boundaries defined by the meanders of a stream. In the early 1900s, land ownership began to become oriented along railroads and streets instead of rivers. This created a new set of values and a different community focus. However, we are now seeing this paradigm shift back. There has been a resurgence in the appreciation of values associated with running water. This is evidenced by real estate advertisements of the day marketing live water and subdivision plats that assign higher values to lands closest to the water. Texas cities are also experiencing growth in creekfront developments. Shoal Creek restoration and development in Austin is attracting billions of dollars in investments around a restored and functional riparian area. The project is designed to buffer floodwater runoff and become a host to lush natural surroundings in the midst of high-density urban development. Creek and river-focused urban events, focus groups, adopt-a-creek groups, watershed councils, etc., they all indicate some of the new riparian focus. Follow the money in Texas cities and you'll find it leading to restored functional riparian areas. This new urban development trend may be cueing from the understanding that people value water. Whether in the city or in the country, different people value different things about creeks and rivers. For example, the people in the photograph on the upper left are enjoying watching a bird, while the gentleman in the lower right is appreciating the big, healthy eastern gamma plant for its forage value. Almost everyone appreciates a place to cool off on a hot summer day. Some recognized values include clean water. They include reliable supplies of water, abundant livestock forage, fish and aquatic habitat, wildlife habitat, as well as natural beauty and recreation. In this class, we will focus on the physical conditions that generate these values rather than the values themselves. So for now, let's set these aside along with our existing paradigms and start a fresh approach to riparian understanding. Much of this course will focus on physical function. A properly functioning riparian area along moving water is defined as one that has enough stuff. Vegetation, landform. It has large woody material, all enough to first and foremost dissipate stream energy. Stabilize banks, reduce erosion, trap sediment, build or enlarge the floodplain, to store water, floodwater retention, groundwater recharge, and sustain base flow. And if these processes are occurring, then they will produce water quality, water quantity, forage, aquatic habitat, wildlife habitat, recreational value, and aesthetic beauty. So it is physical function that produces the values that we appreciate and demand from the creeks and rivers. This is the key concept of this course and valuable concept that can be applied to creeks and rivers anywhere on the planet. Let's take a look at what riparian function looks like on the landscape. Compare these two creeks. You can easily see function versus dysfunction. Here are two other examples where you can see a functional creek and then immediately to the right, a dysfunctional creek. Look carefully here. The riparian area on the left is functional and the riparian area on the right is not. Here you can see functional and dysfunctional areas on the very same creek where management can be seen making a difference. And here you can see the same exact location 7 years apart. Management can make a huge difference in functional condition and value production. By now, you're probably beginning to see some of the things that constitute the difference between functional and dysfunctional riparian conditions. That same seeing can help decipher the presence of functional and dysfunctional riparian condition even in urban settings. A common characteristic of function involves the storage of water. We often refer to riparian areas that store water as a riparian sponge. A riparian sponge holds water and it releases it very slowly. When the sponge is absent, it's often because there is not a functional condition. There is not enough stuff. There's not enough stuff to first and foremost dissipate stream energy. So water runs off and down the stream faster, taking with it the essential fine organic rich particles that could be trapped in the riparian area, which would help hold and store the water. When the water holding capacity of riparian soils is lost, there is no sponge present. Therefore, the water simply runs off and downstream, leaving in little storage for slow future release. The functional and dysfunctional condition of riparian areas almost anywhere can be compared and contrasted by examining this very important characteristic, the presence of a sponge. The riparian area along this creek in Gillespie County is not functioning very well. It is clearly missing adequate vegetation, landform, or large woody material to dissipate stream energy, so none of the other processes can begin to occur. There is no sponge present, and therefore the following are inhibited: energy dissipation, stabilized banks, reduced erosion, sediment trapping, enlarging floodplains, floodwater retention, groundwater recharge, and sustained base flow. All are inhibited. The riparian area along the Leona River and Uvalde is functioning. It has adequate vegetation, landform, or large woody material to dissipate stream energy, so all of the other processes are occurring. There is a sponge present. In this lesson, we'll begin training our eyes to see the riparian areas for their function. With an eye for function, it becomes easier to recognize poor health and to identify the activities that may be hindering riparian recovery. The riparian bullseye, an evaluation tool, uses 10 key indicators to plot health on a target. Learning to see in this way can help to inform decision-making in the favor of riparian function and all the values that it can deliver. These three areas are functioning quite well. In this last picture, don't be misled. The site is highly functional. The banks are fortified with roots and anchored with very large wood or large wood. Signs indicate the floodplain is accessed regularly and that it contains plenty of energy dissipation. Oppositely, these three dysfunctional riparian areas can be evaluated by observing the vegetation present, or lack thereof. A hindrance is any activity or situation that interferes with natural riparian recovery and a healthy function, usually the result of human or animal activity. Hindrances can be identified through close observation of the riparian vegetation. The following are common hindrances observed in Texas riparian areas: farming, mowing, or spraying weeds or brush too close to the bank, logging and related timber harvest activities adjacent to the creek, manicured or altered residential or park landscapes next to the creek, prolonged grazing concentrations in creek areas, excessive population of deer, exotics, or feral hogs in creek areas, burning in riparian areas, removal of large dead wood and downed trees, artificial manipulation of banks, channels, or sediment such as bulldozing, physical alteration of floodplains, excessive vehicle traffic in creek areas, excessive recreational activity or foot traffic in creek areas, excessive alluvial pumping or other withdrawals, in some cases the excessive growth of invasive species that inhibit the ability of natural riparian plants to do their jobs, low water dams and large reservoirs, and poorly designed road crossings and bridges. Using the riparian bullseye evaluation found in the back of your Remarkable Riparian Field Guide, you can develop your eyes to see riparian areas for their function, and you can identify activities that may be hindering the natural riparian recovery process. Can you see these? Can you see the active floodplain, the energy dissipation, new plant colonization, stabilizing vegetation, age diversity? Can you see species diversity, plant vigor, water storage, bank and channel erosion, or sediment deposition? Consistent notation of your observations with this guide, combined with photo point images collected over time, are key to monitoring riparian health. Not all of the parameters will be appropriate for all channel types. Leaving some portions of the target blank will not detract from your evaluation. Most of the 10 parameters will not apply to ephemeral streams, and likewise, some of the indicators will be difficult to evaluate on tidal-influenced segments of coastal streams. The bullseye area in the center of the target represents optimal function. The middle ring of the target represents an at-risk condition, a kind of riparian health danger zone. and the outermost ring of the target represents dysfunction. To register your observations, you need to fill in the dots for the appropriate zone of each of the 10 indicators. Again, the inner zone, or the bullseye area in the center of the target, represents optimal function. The middle represents an at-risk condition and a kind of riparian health danger zone, and the outer ring of the target represents dysfunction. One of the first and foremost considerations is floodplain access. Does floodwater have access to a floodplain? Why is this important? It's important because access to a floodplain is essential in order to give floodwater a place to spread out and slow down. Floodplains allow floodwaters to slow down and deposit their sediment, a necessary component of water storage in riparian areas. Organic matter, contained in most flood sediment, is known to increase the water-holding capacity of soils, sands, and gravels. Riparian areas can support stream flows during dry times by releasing stored water. So how can you see it? To evaluate if a stream has access in its floodplain, look for debris or silted deposits from a recent flood event. You will likely notice that where vegetation is thick in the floodplain, new sediment such as sand, fine gravels, or flood mud have been trapped. Look closely at that sediment and you may find pieces of leaves, tree bark, seed holes, and other tiny bits of organic matter. To identify those would be ideal. You would hit the bullseye. For active floodplains, is there new plant colonization? This is important because if floodwaters are being slowed down and sediment trapped, then those sediments need to be colonized by new... I totally misread. Pause. Okay, resuming with appropriate slide. Active floodplains. When streams are downcut, or if they are confined by roads or cement embankments, or if they are downcut and lack access to a floodplain, it is very difficult for them to heal, and other problems will ensue. For energy dissipation, ask yourself, is there enough present? This is important because floodwaters carry a lot of energy. If enough vegetation, rocks, or large dead wood are present, then floodwaters will be slowed down and their energy will be dissipated or spread out across the rough surfaces of these items. Slowing water down and dissipating energy is essential for healthy functioning riparian systems. So how can you see it? Just look for an unkept array of natural stuff. If the riparian area is open and park-like, then it's probably lacking in energy dissipation. For new plant colonization, is there enough of it? This is important because if floodwaters are being slowed down and sediment trapped, then those sediments need to be colonized by new plants in order to become stabilized and incorporated into the floodplain. This eventually will add to the water storage capacity. To see this, look for new young plants or runners from existing plants growing on newly deposited sediment. This may be most apparent on a point bar where new sediment may have been dropped at the edge of the channel. Plants that are good at this are called colonizers. While they may lack strong stabilizing roots, they are able to grow quickly and create conditions for other stronger plants to follow. Here on the barren area above, or the barren area pictured, new plants have not visually begun to colonize. Is there stabilizing vegetation? This could be herbaceous and it could be woody, or it could be a mix. And why is this important? It takes strong-rooted vegetation to withstand the energy of floodwater. Plants are rated for their ability to withstand floods with a stability rating or SR number. As you recall, SR1 is bare ground, and SR10 would be equivalent to the strength of an anchored rock. Good coverage with plants having SR ratings of 6 or higher is usually a minimum for weathering floods. When deep-rooted plants and high-stability plants are mixed with low-stability plants or large wood and boulders, the community stability is greatly enhanced as roots are often interlocked and incorporated with the wood and rock material. So how can you see it? Using your field guide, identify riparian plants and look up their stability ratings. You want to see good coverage on the riparian landscape of plants with an average of SR 6 or 7 or greater, along with the presence of large wood and boulders. When stabilizing vegetation is sparse or absent, then the site is clearly missing the bullseye. Are there plants of a variety of ages present? Why is this important? Well, age diversity of riparian plants is an indicator of health. Plants of different ages can help provide stability during fluctuations in flow and climatic conditions. The presence of both young and old palatable plants can indicate that past and present grazing and browsing have not hindered function. How can you see it? Identify riparian plants using the field guide. Look for young and middle-aged as well as older mature examples. The image here shows age diversity as well as a lack of diversity. It does also in this image. Can you see it? Are there a number of different important riparian species present? Pictured here, you can see eastern gamagrass, Indian grass, bulrush, cattail, spikerush, and cottonwood. In this next photo, you can see bald cypress, Mexican ash, cedar elm, pecan, red mulberry, box elder maple, and roughleaf dogwood. Why is this important? In nature, diversity contributes to system stability and resilience. This is also true in riparian systems where the diversity of riparian plant species can help lead to better functional conditions. A diverse group of riparian plants creates a plant community that is more durable and functional than any single species could be on its own. This is especially important underground where an interlaced series of diverse roots can interlock to hold channels in place, even elevating them to create more water storage across the entire valley. So how can you see it? Identify riparian plants using your field guide. Look closely for a group of high-stability native plants that can indicate a functional plant community. You may find only grasses and sedges or only woody riparian plants or some of both, but the important thing is to look for diversity within the groups. There is little plant diversity here. This riparian area is dominated by bald cypress and obligate with an SR rating of 9. It is very stable, but a single species is never a safe situation in nature. These cypress trees need some woody understory and some herbaceous cover to support them. Many of the plants shown in these images are palatable grazing and browsing species, yet there are no signs that vigor is impaired by humans or animals. Some of these locations are used for occasional livestock grazing, but with proper management, riparian plant vigor has been maintained. So are plants healthy? Are they vigorous? And why is this important? Riparian plants that are browsed, mowed, or grazed short continuously can become unhealthy. Unhealthy plants can be compromised and have compromised root systems that may not be able to provide energy dissipation and bank stabilizing functions. If vigor is compromised, then it is time to do something different, such as removing the hindrances that are causing the problems. So how can you see it? Look for plants that have their leaves intact. Over time, heavy browsing, grazing, and mowing that cut the leaves and stems can cause them to develop scabs and stunted or scarred appearances. Once you have trained your eye to see stunted plants or recognize the browse line, then you can easily spot this hindrance. This image shows a distinct browse line on riparian trees, which indicates a vigor problem. While these trees appear to be healthy when their trunks are exposed from browsing, their flood resilience is weakened. Bushy bluestem on the left and buttonbush bush above are both palatable browse plants and are showing signs of extreme overgrazing and or long-term browsing. Riparian grasses in this image are vigorous on one bank, yet the opposite bank is impaired by mowing and weed eating. So are there signs of water storage in banks and floodplains? And why is that important? Well, one of the important services maintained by riparian areas is the storage of water out of sight, below ground, or within the banks for release to the stream during dry times. Water storage capacity is influenced by the volume of organic matter within soils and can be indicated by the presence of water-loving plant species. A plant's wetland indicator status can tell you if the water is regularly present below the ground where it's growing. How can you see this? Use your field guide. Look for the obligate or OBL and facultative wet or FACW plants. This photo here indicates no or extremely poor water storage. Is there excessive bank or channel erosion? In this image, some erosion is visible, but not excessive. And why is this important? Erosion is a natural part of the riparian system, but like most things in nature, balance is needed. Erosion of stream banks should be compensated by deposition and the creation and maintenance of meander bins. Meander bins can aid in energy dissipation within a channel. The more crooked a stream becomes, the lower the gradient or the flatter the slope. And how can you see it? Look for signs of a bank or channel erosion. Is it in predictable locations or on meander bends where point bars are being formed with the eroded materials just downstream? Does the channel look downcut or incised like a drainage ditch? And if so, it may also lack an active floodplain. This is how an out-of-balance erosion looks. Is sediment being deposited in a balanced way? In this photo, the answer is yes. Why is this important? A river moves and processes both sediment and water, and they must be in balance. If too much sediment is being delivered to the channel and there is not enough water energy to process it, sediment can build up in the middle of the channel and other illogical places. When water and sediment are in balance, sediments are deposited on point bars and contribute to the natural meander pattern of a waterway. Just recall the principles of Lane's balance on page 8 of your remarkable riparian field guide. So how can you see this? If heaps and piles of sediment build up in the channel, or if mounds of sediment are being trapped behind a structure with unnatural erosion below, then these are signs that sediment is not being processed and the stream is not in balance. These images show heaps and mounds of sediments in illogical places. This is a riparian site along the South Llano River in Kimball County. 10 years ago, the site was a large, naked gravel bar, but it is recovering nicely and slow now. The wide, well-vegetated floodplain has caught enough fine sediment to sustain good plant growth. Baccharis is the plant that kicked off the recovery, and now there is good diversity of plants with increased stability ratings. The site still lacks strong coverage of switchgrass, emery sedge, and eastern gamma grass, and while they are present, they are not yet dominant. Look closely and you can identify the distinct water storage zones by the plants growing here. The obligate plants are mostly at the water's edge, and the bushy blue stem of fac wet plant can be seen in the next zone. Facultative plants like baccharis and sycamore are seen higher up on the floodplain. This photo indicates a recovering gravel bar and a narrowing channel. Here is an observation of the same photo using the riparian bullseye evaluation. Note how the 10 indicators are assessed and marked appropriately on the target. First of all, the floodplain is clearly defined and accessible. If you look closely at it, you can see bits of flood debris. It's the inner zone, the bullseye. Only in some energy dissipation along the bank and in the channel, but abundant energy dissipation in the floodplain would be inner zone bullseye. Abundant colonization of fresh sediment like water willow and spike rush would be inner zone bullseye. With some gaps in coverage of stabilizing plant communities, which are not well enough established yet, would be the mid-zone at risk. Abundant reproduction of woody plants like baccharis and sycamore, or grasses and sedges like spike rush and bushy bluestem would be the inner zone or bullseye. Modest diversity of woody plants like baccharis, sycamore, buttonbush, etc., and modest diversity of grasses and sedges, which only 4 are visible, would add up to a mid-zone at risk. Woody plant vigor not readily apparent in the photo, but herbaceous plant vigor appears healthy and vigorous, would be an inner zone bullseye. Obligate and facultative wet species, indicating water storage, are abundant near the water's edge but not further back, which means mid-zone at risk. With no excessive bank erosion visible in this photo, we're hitting a bullseye, the inner zone. And sediment appears normal and balanced in this photo, so that also would be bullseye, inner zone. For riparian function and water quality connections, the quality of water in our rivers and streams can be influenced either positively by healthy riparian function or negatively by the presence of one or more hindrances. The information here explains how 7 common water quality parameters are connected to good riparian function. With bacteria, E. coli is a type of bacteria found in the large intestines of warm-blooded water animals that can cause severe illness to humans if ingested. E. coli is an indicator that disease-causing organisms may be present in the water. When rainfall runs off over the land, it can carry bacteria into streams. Riparian vegetation can slow and filter runoff water before it reaches a stream, causing sediment with bacteria particles attached to settle out and be deposited on the banks. Microorganisms in riparian soil can destroy harmful bacteria as a part of the soil food web. Second, you have total suspended solids, or TSS. These are a measure of materials or particles, like soil and minerals, that are suspended in the water and can be trapped by a filter. Riparian vegetation helps to slow runoff and allows for solids to settle out before entering the stream. Third are dissolved oxygen, or DO. These are very vital to almost all aquatic life. Oxygen levels in water vary throughout the day and the seasons and are determined by many factors such as temperature, flow, aquatic plants, dissolved or suspended solids, altitude, and human activities. Riparian vegetation helps to maintain healthy oxygen levels needed for aquatic life. Fourth is temperature. Temperature is the controlling factor for the life cycle of aquatic life. It is influenced by the time of day, seasonal shade, water depth, flow rate, and altitude. Riparian vegetation, especially tall trees, can help to shade streams and to regulate fluctuations in water temperature so to maintain healthy fish habitat. Narrow meandering channels don't get as hot or cold as shallow, flat, and straightened ones. Sixth is clarity. Clarity of water is a measure of how far light can travel through it. The clearer the water, the farther the light can travel, promoting photosynthesis and aquatic plant growth. Clarity can be degraded by the presence of fine sediment within the stream channel. Good riparian vegetation can help to trap and stabilize fine sediment before they enter a stream. And last is flow. Flow is often expressed in cubic feet per second, or CFS, and is a measurement of the velocity of surface water as it travels across the landscape. Soils, aquatic plants, and tree roots can affect flow rates and contribute to recharge when they capture floodwater and hold it in place for slow release, thus helping maintain flow during dry times.